Welcome to the podcast. My name is Kyle Ackerman. I am the co-owner of Saturn's Ring alongside with my beautiful fiance, Sarah. And we've wanted to make this show for a long time and it's finally happening. So I just want to say thank you to everyone, not only the students, but for all the viewers on YouTube. It means a lot. This is going to stay on YouTube and then it'll be on all of your podcast platforms. But with this show, I just kind of want to give you a rundown of what to expect in this first episode. And then I also want to give you just kind of a rundown of my background, as this marks 10 years that I've been in this multimedia industry. So I have a lot of stories. I have a lot of experiences, good and bad ones. And I just hope that it provides some sort of perspective and value when the effort that I put into my videos and my curriculum, because there's just a lot there. And there's some biases that I have with certain techniques and methods. But as this industry has really boomed, I would say in the past 2 years, it's kind of changed the landscape for the better. And I haven't been this excited about what I've done in a long time, because as more competition kind of came to this industry, the better it got, because it forced big players like Adobe to get better and to to really refine their product, because there were certain applications that were doing a lot of good with very little. And a lot of people were getting into this industry, and I thought my voice would be one to kind of help guide this younger generation, because I'm 26 now. I started realistically when I was 16 with actual professional shoots, but I've been editing videos since I was 12. I could honestly say that I was editing things at 12 years old. So I thought in this first episode, I talk about my background, and I kind of have some notes here, so I'll kind of peer down. But for those that are listening on a car ride or if you're on your commute, I just want to say thank you, because I do that all the time with all my favorite podcasts and happy to be in your ear. So here we go. So I really got my start with media with I absolutely love music. I love movies. I think cinema's cool, and video games. I am obsessed with scores for movies and video games. One of my favorites that if you follow us on Instagram, you'll probably notice that I love Red Dead Redemption. It is easily my favorite game of all time, alongside Red Dead Redemption 2. Those make my heart very happy. Those games are very close and dear to me. And the soundtracks are just something else. So it really started with music and just an appreciation with sound, because like many kids, you probably started with earbuds. And when you upgrade to actual headphones, it kind of changes things. You hear things that are cleaner, things that you haven't heard before in some track. And that was kind of like an eye-opener that I could identify when I was like 9 or 10. I was like, oh my God, this sounds great. But that's kind of where it started. I played a lot of video games with my friends. My parents had a camcorder, and I really didn't think much of it. But in 2007, I was at a friend's house, and he had an older brother, and his older brother logged on YouTube. I didn't know what YouTube was. I played some games on my family's computer, but YouTube was like this foreign concept, but people were sharing videos to it. And that's kind of my first introduction. Like, those are one of the first things that I remember about YouTube, was like, it's there, it's a thing. And I started watching YouTube at a pretty young age. And I thought the idea was so cool. It's like, oh, you just record yourself and upload it for people to see. How cool is that? So now that I have the knowledge of YouTube, and I have like maybe a resource for my parents that they have a camera of some sort, I fell in love with rhythm games. And if you don't know what that is, you might have heard of Clone Hero for the Gen Zers, but we had Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and those aren't too far off. I think the last one came out a few years ago, but they haven't been back since, really. But I absolutely loved those games. I played them all the time. Like, I would wake up really early, and I'd be hitting those drum pads at like 8 a.m. My parents weren't too happy about that, but I loved playing Guitar Hero and Rock Band. When I got on YouTube, I also saw other people recording themselves playing Rock Band and Guitar Hero. But what was really cool with some of those creators was, okay, they would have a camera just pointing at the TV. But there were some creators that actually had like video editing experience, where they would have themselves like drumming on screen, and then they masked the game, like a screen capture of the game. They masked the track where you hit the notes. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever, like a picture-in-picture from the screen and the person that's doing the action. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. So that is what really got me interested in video editing. It's like, I want to do that. I want to put the track right next to me as I'm playing. That's what I want to do. And so at the software of the time, the one that I had that my parents bought at some point, it probably came with the camcorder that they bought. I think it was Adobe Elements 4 or Adobe Premiere 4. And that was a video editing software. And I think at the time they might have been on 5 or something. But this is when you could actually buy the discs of the software. And at the time, I got familiar with that on my parents' computer. I didn't know how to use it at all. It was like all self-taught. I tried to record a few things to put it on there, but I defaulted to Windows Movie Maker. If anyone is familiar with that, that was kind of the default on a lot of Windows computers. From there, I had a little bit of experience like recording myself, like doing funny things with my friends and dumb stuff. But I really wanted to figure out how people were screen capturing their video game. I was like, well, how do I do that? Because if I just point a camera at the TV, like I get all these blurry lines, it looks weird, it doesn't look very professional, so to speak. How do I do that? So I just got online and I eventually found and landed on something that I could buy at Best Buy. And it was called the Dazzled Capture Card. It was all analog, so it was the yellow, white, red inputs along with an S-video, standard video input, and with a USB. So theoretically, you would take the AVI inputs from your console, so in this case it was my Xbox, and then I would plug it into the capture card and then plug that into my computer. But I needed to find a way on how to split up because there was only those inputs. So I had to get a Y splitter, and this is like where the nerdiness started right here, was trying to record and screen capture my Rock Band videos. So once I figured that out, it's like, oh, I can have a Y splitter. So I can plug in a separate AVI set of cables, a separate yellow, white, and red, into this Y splitter, and then my Xbox into that one. So I can still plug it into TV and plug it into the computer. And that's what I did. And then I also wanted other people to know like how I was recording those videos. So my first tutorial was in 2009 at the age of 12 years old. So I thought it was really cool. Those videos are still up. I mean, they say 14 years old, and I mean, there's my little self putting together my first tutorial with just a camcorder, no mics, just a camcorder on a tripod, and me moving the camcorder when I needed to show you something. And I think I rehearsed it 3 or 4 times because I was like, okay, I know that I can do this faster. So it was all in one take. So the first really official software that I used was Pinnacle Studio 12, and that was included with my Dazzle capture card. So that's where I really started there. And then I made that tutorial, and that kind of marked how I wanted to be online, was to help someone like me, because at the time, I don't think there was many tutorials on how to screen capture for a Rock Band video. So it was kind of niche, but it was blowing my mind because I'm like, hey, I finally I figured it out. Like I saved up whatever money I got for like Christmas and my birthday and spent it on this capture card. And I remember my parents were like, what are you doing? Why do you want this? And I would try to explain it to them, but I eventually figured it out. And that software introduced me into video editing. As you probably have guessed, I was using like my parents' laptop. I pretty much destroyed probably 2 or 3 of those computers with video editing software. The quality was okay, but man, when it ran smooth, it looked great. I was so happy that I could have HD videos on like a YouTube video when I was uploading them. And even back then with Adobe, I'm jumping ahead here, but Adobe has always had like a straight to upload option for YouTube. For as long as I remember that feature being in like Adobe Premiere 7. It was crazy. But anyway, that's what I would do. And it was not very reliable. Let me make that clear. But I think it's much more reliable now. But anyway, going back to kind of where I started. So I took a peek at Adobe Premiere Elements 4 because one of the creators, he talked about him using Adobe. I was like, oh, my parents have that. And I tried to mask. I tried to do that same masking method. I just couldn't figure it out at the time. But you definitely could have with that software. So moving on a few years, I'm probably like 12, 14, 15. I eventually get my first drum set. I love drums so much. And my parents got me like a starter kit. It was like from like Toys R Us. It was like a first act. And then I eventually upgraded to a like real Pearl Forum like 5-piece kit. And then I eventually got this huge, ridiculous kit, but I eventually sold that. But I still have my my 5-piece. Like I don't think I'll ever sell those, just because it's it's like nostalgic and it's like my first ever drum set. So if I ever had kids or like a niece or nephew, like that is definitely something that I would like want to give to them. But so I got serious about drumming. There's even some videos with my old band on there when I'm like in 8th grade. So I was really serious about it. And on YouTube, there was a lot of like drum covers. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, because now it's like, well, I could show me playing this video game. It's a little silly because it's not the real thing. So I'm like, well, I could play real drums and figure out like how they record them. So that's like where that next phase of nerdiness started. So this was like my second rabbit hole. Like I wanted to get more drumming equipment, which I did. And I was trying to work at any jobs as possible because I really wanted to like do drum covers on YouTube. And I wanted to record myself. And so like my first drum covers was just a camcorder over my shoulder on my drum kit and me drumming. And me going in Movie Maker and just layering whatever track that I was playing. And then as the copyright system came up with the Rock Band and like rhythm games, all those got like completely wiped. And what I mean by that is instead of like copyright claiming the video, they would just take whatever song track that was playing and replace it with something on YouTube Library. It could be like a drum cover from like Lil Wayne or All That Remains. And then it would just be a totally like random song from the library. So you'd click on the video and it wouldn't be that. And like that was early YouTube days. That was probably like 2011 when they were really trying to figure out the copyright system. Getting out of that and jumping down this rabbit hole, that's where I just got into audio. And I wanted to figure out how I could mic up my drum set. So like the first step was I needed to buy a mic drum kit setup. And it came with, I think, 5 or 7 mics. So it had like 2 overheads and it had like some tom-toms and then it had like a bass drum pedal. And then that also introduced me into like stands. And I was like, oh yeah, I need like certain mic stands. I need to get a certain like weighted, they call them like desktop mic stands now, but it's really like a drum. It's like a drum kickstand. And so I mic'd them up. I bought this Behringer audio interface because the first mistake I made, this was my first audio mistake, I bought a mixer. And a mixer is typically used for live events. And I had, of course, no earthly idea of what I was doing. So I plugged in the mixer into my computer that was doing Audition. And I thought I could program each of those tracks to my mixer. But that's not how it works. It's all an input out. So I was like, oh, okay, I figured that out. I need an interface. So that was kind of the next stage. So I bought an interface with like 8 inputs. It was a Behringer, I think it was like UM 1820 or something like that. And what was nice about it is that I could plug it straight into my computer. It's all USB driven. And then it had its own power supply. Anyway, so it had 8 mic tracks. So I was like, okay, perfect. Like I can put in 8 mics into this thing. So as I was doing that, I eventually recorded some drum tracks. Like I could program each of those tracks in Audition and record my cymbals, my hi-hat, like wherever the mics were, I could actually program them. And I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. I had all these tracks, I was making these sounds. And then I got into mixing. And mixing was terrible. I hated every part of it because it was so frustrating. And I didn't know like I needed headphones. So I was like mixing out of the laptop speakers and like with crappy earbuds and all that stuff. But then I eventually found out like, oh, I need like, that goes into another rabbit hole of like, oh, I need like monitor speakers or I need some like really good headphones. So that got me into the audio realm of it. But I eventually, I was doing a lot, like I know I'm skipping over a lot of things here, but kind of the next part of that was, okay, like this takes a lot of time. I'm really not that good at it. I'm not good at it fast enough with all the things that I was doing. So I was like, well, I have this equipment. What else can I do with it? Because this is a good chunk of change. Like I think I can return these mics, but I know I could use this audio interface for something else. And so I did. Podcast. The first podcast I ever listened to was Serial by NPR. And my parents went to Illinois for Christmas. I have some family up there, and I stayed. And while I was like wrapping up all the Christmas decorations, I just listened to that podcast over the course of like a few days as I was, cleaning stuff up. And like I stayed because I was doing a like winter like accelerated program to get more college credits. That was my first podcast, and then I think I got into Joe Rogan a little bit, and I really liked the format of Joe Rogan, because once I found it on YouTube, I was like, whoa, they got a whole setup. And like the producer had a similar setup like mine, except he had cameras. He had multiple cameras. And that's what I loved about it. It was like, oh, okay. So maybe I should like buy more cameras, because I only had one camera. It was like my parents' like family camcorder. And my mom eventually bought one of the camcorders that I still use today. They're over 10 years old, and I still use them. They're all 1080p camcorders. But I was like, okay, so I need more cameras. So that was like my next hustle on trying to like get more equipment was, okay, I'm going to take these back, and then I'm going to see if I can get another camera. And I got like a really cheapo R80 Canon camcorder. So now that I had two cameras, I was like, okay, like, I don't need three. I think I'll be fine with two. I can just switch back and forth between me and my friends. And that's exactly what I did. So I bought this cheap camcorder, and I bought two cheap mics with the return money that I got from my drum mic kit. And then I started my first podcast. And that opened me up to everything that you need for a podcast, as far as the aspect ratios, the description that you need, the titles. Do you want different cover art? All of these terms I was starting to learn because I started my own podcast. But before I go further there, I actually got really enthused with audio video editing when I went into high school. So I'm going to kind of draw it back a bit, because in my junior and senior year, that's when I started my podcast. How that really took shape was my high school offered a audio video program. And the extension to that was like, oh, you take this typing class, and the next step up is audio video editing. And we did Adobe Photoshop and Premiere Pro. I don't think we touched anything else, but those were the main ones that was in the curriculum. And they had a whole booklet of what to do. And at the time, I wrote in my notes that it was Premiere 6, because I think that's what I started out in my freshman year. And then I eventually bought for myself Premiere 7, and I think I skipped 8, and I do have 9. I have both of those software disks. Back in the days where you could just buy the software, which was nice. And as I did that and got better, I cared a lot more about it than probably my peers did. So I was able to understand Photoshop and like do more graphics for the school news and like be on camera and do all of these things and like host events, because like I knew, like, I started to just put productions together because I was just better at the software than my peers. So it just like made sense to me because I cared about it more. Like a lot of the activities that were in the curriculum that was taught to us were super boring, but it gave you exposure to like how to do certain effects that you would see on TV shows. I mean, I did the school news, editing a bunch of stuff, like the local reporting that we would do around campus or whatever the lunch was. Pineapple tidbits is always my favorite thing to say. But I eventually was like, oh, okay, like I think I can make this into a career, because I was a bit of an athlete and I was on the school news. So they just like, they kind of put those two together and be like, oh, we're going to call him Anchorman. So my last name is Ackerman. And on my letterman, it says Anchorman. And, I was going to do this thing and go into broadcasting because I did like the live shoots. What was great about this program, and like it's a pretty big school now, but it's a 6A school with a lot of kids. And in that program, they gave us a decent budget. It has a huge budget now, which is awesome. And I'm so jealous of those kids. But when we started, we still had just like some regular camcorders. Some of them still shot with tape. And then we eventually went to digital, I think like the next year. But that first year, we did everything like analog. It was pretty cool. But from there, and like I remember when I liked that process more than SD cards, which is so ridiculous now saying that. But that's, like as technology gets better, that's just kind of how it works. But we had these huge cameras that looked so professional. We had a teleprompter, and we just started there. Our teleprompter was like a TV, and then we eventually like upgraded to these nice ones that were proper from, I think, teleprompter people. And I still rent those out for my mentor till this day. We rented them out a few months ago. Thank you, Doc Sadberry, if you're watching this. I love you so much. It's my first mentor that really, he saw me and saw my passion. And what was nice about our high school too was that they had a contract with a live stream broadcast network. And there was two of them. Towards my junior and senior year, there became the second one that had a contract with the school district. And I was able to call games, like color commentating, play-by-play commentating. I played a lot of basketball and football, a little bit of baseball. So like I knew how those games work, so I could call them. And then I also knew some of my peers, so it was easy for me to like call out names and like describe what's happening. But all of those experiences is what I was getting like in high school before I even graduated. That's what really was like, oh, okay, this makes sense for me to go into broadcasting because I actually enjoy this. So I was like the video guy, the Anchorman dude that everyone saw, had all this big hair like I do now. But I eventually got hurt, I think like summer of my junior year, so I didn't get to play much at all my senior year. So I really just doubled down on like videos. So I think on my personal channel, I still have it, but like I would record my teammates and do like a little highlight reel. I would make the soundtrack to our warm-ups, either if we were traveling or if we were at home, I'd make those CDs, burn them. And then I would also call the games. So I think I was on JV my junior year. And when I got hurt in the kind of at the end of the season, I would call the senior games because I was a guy on the I was a guy on the school news and I was the athlete. So what's funny about that experience of me like commentating and calling games was I was doing it for like a little bit of money with that contract that the school had. But how I got asked was the guy got sick, and I thought it was just hilarious. And like I knew that the senior guys would get a kick out of it, of me like calling their game. And then I called their game once, and then I was getting paid gigs to go travel with the team, or even other schools in the district would call me to go call their game, which is so funny because I'm like 16, maybe 17 at the time, and I'm like traveling in like in a little suit, and I'm gonna call a high school game. I don't know, it was just funny. So as my senior year is like coming to a close, I was working a few jobs. I worked at a restaurant. I was tutoring kids on how to do free throws and ball handling at like a local gym. And then I was working a little bit with my dad's company. And as that was coming to a close, for whatever reason, I don't know if I was scared to not get picked or, like I don't know what I was really doing at that time, because I think I was perplexed on like what to do next, because I had some options of like job opportunities of like, oh, I could go do this or whatever. Or do I apply to college to like do this broadcasting thing? At the time, I was looking at U of H, and like I was like, well, yeah, I should just stay home. It'd be cheaper, blah, blah, blah. And I applied, but I applied really, really late towards the deadline, and I didn't get it. I didn't get accepted or whatever. So I opted to do community college, and that was great. And I will say this on camera, community college, Lone Star is where I went. Lone Star College System is what they call it. That was easily the hardest 2 years comparative to my Texas A&M degree. Like they made you earn that thing. They made you earn that associates or transfer credits. So I went there for 2 years, and then I was still working a few odd jobs. I think I was doing landscaping. I was making putting greens, which is a whole thing. And then I was working with my dad, a little bit with my mom's company as well. And then at that point, I did a little bit of tutoring for like free throw shooting for kids. And then I eventually got really serious about the broadcast company. The broadcast company, they just live stream high school events. And at the time, here down in the South, in Texas specifically, they are like obsessed with high school football. So that's what we were live streaming most of the time. But we would do all sports. We do volleyball, basketball, baseball, softball, like all that stuff. Like I love commentating games, whether there was a camera or not. Like I just love to just have fun on a microphone. I thought it was really entertaining. As I got better at that, like I started and it was rough. But as I got better at that, they liked that I was a pretty good cameraman. So that's kind of what started for me to kind of go more behind the scenes. Because in high school, I was a lot like on camera and doing the editing, but I didn't really like fix the camera or shoot the camera until like I really got serious about this live streaming gig. So I would go to different schools in a certain district, and I would, it'd be a bunch of us. It'd be one or two of us that would grab a camera and just record and try and get highlights for the game. And then at the end of it, we would rush to the studio, dump that SD card, and make sure that if a good play happens, like if someone scores a touchdown, we aim at the scoreboard and then do that. So that gives the editor like, okay, I need to grab that clip that's before because he took a shot at the scoreboard or whatever. And we would build all of these highlights for the midnight show. And the midnight show was broadcasted with like a big network. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Fox Sports Southwest, but that was the contract that they had. But yeah, and that wrap-up show was at midnight. So I did that for about 6 months part-time. And then towards around my birthday, I think Thanksgiving time, maybe it was closer to my birthday, they offered me a full-time job. And that blew my mind. Like, I just got out of high school. I've been working hard, been doing a lot of odd jobs throughout high school. And then I wanted to be this broadcaster, and boom, it's right in my lap. Like, okay, cool. Like, I told my parents about it. They're like, well, this is what you want to do, right? It sounds like a great opportunity. At 18, I had my first like big boy full-time job right out of high school. Didn't have to really go to college. I mean, I was still taking college courses to get credits. In the meantime, I wasn't going to a big university, but I was like, well, this is great. Like, let's just do this. And then the reality of salary pay and the commute in a big city like Houston, we're talking 3-hour commute every single day. We're talking working every single weekend, so 7 days a week. You're paid for 40, but you're working closer to 70 or 80. And boy, did I cut my teeth there. And I was only there for 6 months, and that was rough. Almost every single one of my friends was like in college, living it up, doing crazy stuff. And I was working with like professionals that have kids and mortgages and like all this stuff. So it was a really like culture shock because I was like the baby of the entire group. I think the youngest was maybe in his early 20s. But the conversations that I had with all of my colleagues there at the live stream company, I still talk to them every now and then today. And like at the time, those were like some really important friendships and relationships that I hold dear because they kind of gave me a little bit of a sneak peek of what it's like to be an adult. And I know I was 18 at the time, and that classifies me as an adult, but having and working with people that are in the same environment and that have a lot of experience was so valuable at that young age. And I was just green. I was ready to do whatever because I wanted to just get as much experience as humanly possible. Because what was on my mind then was they had a program at Texas A&M, and I was trying to get into that. And so the midnight show that I mentioned earlier, that was like at the end of the night, like we're running around, driving across Houston, Texas, like hours upon hours of like gathering footage for the show. And then it's at midnight. So we're working from like 3 p.m. Like that's not even like us doing setup at noon and 1 and 2 p.m. and like trying to eat something before the game starts and all that stuff. We're going to have to go to like different spots throughout the city to get this footage and bring it back because there might not be good internet connection or someone might not have a computer or all this other stuff. So we're building this show at the end and like no one wants to do it. Like, oh my God. Okay. Like we finally got the edits. Does someone want to run camera? Does someone want to run camera for this show? And I was like, hell yeah, I'll do it. I was sweating like crazy. Didn't know what I was doing. I was just sitting behind a tripod, recording these personalities doing their broadcast for Fox Sports. And I did that for the whole season. I did it for, I think it was about 4 months, whatever the football season was. And like, that was a great thing that I got to put on my resume. I worked for ESPN for not only calling games, but I ran a lot of camera for ESPN and assisted the announcers and the whole production team. I led some productions and just me like going to commercial, switching cameras, communicating with the cameraman that was, on the telecom stuff. Like I got some real great hands-on experience doing that job. But my big excuse was like, it was really long hours. It was really hard. I had no life, like, at all, because I was also like hustling like on the side. But I eventually got out of that. My big excuse was to just go back to school, because if I didn't go to school then, I don't think I would have went. It's like, okay, I'm 18. Like, do I really want to keep doing this, or should I like really focus back on school? Because I hate school. I've always hated school. And I should just go to school now and get it over with, because I don't think I'm going to go back. I don't think I could put it off and then go back to school. So that's what I did. So it was a pretty easy exit for me. I was like, hey guys, like I'm actually going to go back to school. They're like, all right, great, come back. And I didn't go back. But with that being said, I mean, I made some good salary for the time that I was there. You know, for 6 months, I made about like $18K. It was like $3K a month for an 18-year-old. That was like pretty substantial life-altering money. But that is a quick rundown of those first few years. Getting familiar with software, the concept of it, with those Rock Band videos, then moving into kind of my school news phase, kind of testing out different softwares, and then working with a media company, eventually getting on as full-time, and then leaving that. And then I get kind of thrusted into this college experience, and then I get hired on as a podcast producer. And that really starts and accelerates like my big transformation that I do in the next 5 years, really. Really focusing on building production and really knowing the nuts and bolts of what it takes to be in the industry. Not just being someone behind the camera, not just being an editor, not just being someone that's on camera. It's everything in between. All of those nuances were pivotal to me starting my first company and kind of leading me to where I am today with Saturn's Ring. So with the next one, I will see you soon. Thank you for tuning in. Feel free to leave a rating or a comment or a review, because I'm going to be putting these out pretty consistently. Talk to you soon.